All right. I think we are live.
Okay.
All right. So let me do the countdown. I'm going to take a deep breath because I ran around about 3 minutes before. So let me do the countdown and then we will be ready. Hello, Pink. Can you go ahead and flip the camera? All right. So, once again, welcome to Love Over Coffee, Voices Now Heard or Not Heard. We go back and forth. This is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And in honor of Gabby Petito, I am doing 31 nights of domestic violence awareness during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Also, this month is Mental Health Awareness and Depression Awareness Month, and it is also Breast Cancer Survivor Month. So there's a lot that goes on in October. And of course, this is a topic that should be covered every day because sadly we know from the statistics out there that it is lived every day by someone. So 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence. The statistics for men is 1 in 6 or 1 in 9. I've seen both statistics. Um, and of course, the hardest part is finding your voice because when you're in the abusive situation, it is silenced. And even when you come out of it, you get asked all the questions like, why did you stay? Why didn't you leave? Why were you with him for so long? Why were you with her for so long? Why didn't you see the red flags? And if you are talking when you first come out of it, you silence yourself quickly because it seems as though no one really wants to hear your story. And then there, of course, are those moments where you don't think anyone believes your story. So you're just kind of like, I'm just not going to talk about it. And that is good for a while because it does facilitate healing sometimes. But overall, it does not help bring awareness. And I'm not saying you need to be where I am or perhaps where our guest is tonight, but you will get there. And one of the key goals is be gentle with yourself, self love, self care, heal trauma, set boundaries, expect respect, don't ignore the red flags. And all of those things will help you get to where it is you need to be to start your own healing. So, for those of you on TikTok, this is not my normal platform. Many times you see me self love, self care through journaling and crafting, some me time. But tonight, you're watching another episode. This is night 14. There will be 31 total. Night 14 of Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard. So let me shut up and let me silence myself for a moment, at least to introduce my guest. So her name is Debbie Griffiths. She is an author, she is an advocate, she is a survivor, and you met her briefly last night in the rebroadcast of the story of Nicole Singh Cooley, which was told by Glenn and Claudia Singh Cooley, her parents. Um, so I know that Debbie probably knows about what I do. Nicole was 25. She was murdered by her boyfriend at the time. She had an EPO out on him. When she went to court, she decided to drop it. Back then, I asked this question last night, Debbie, why in the world would they have asked the victim if they would like to drop the EPO? And when the judge said, "Are you sure?" I keep thinking the brain does not even know how to answer that question, because when you are with someone and you
Yeah.
think they are all that in a bag of chips and then some, how do you even begin to explain to someone else, no, I'm not sure, but because I think back to the Gabby Petito case, which we've also covered this month, as a reintroduction to her. And you know, I know in my own situation, I stood on the front porch and said, "Can you stay for the weekend and be gone by Monday?" And at the same time, I'm like, "Can't this just be over? Like, I don't even know how to end this, and yet I'm still worried about where he's going to live and what he's going to do because I'm the money, and he was using me for my money, but I'm the money, and it's like I'm still worried about him, and yet I want it to be over." It's a very confusing time. So as I said last night, many states now take the charges in their hands and run with them, and so that the victim cannot drop the charges, because that happens so many times. So, Debbie Griffiths, I always start with the same question. Um, Tell us who you are, tell us where you've been, and tell us where you're going. And I'm going to see if I can bring you up a little bit bigger. Of course, that's so big. When
Okay.
it's that big, then no one can see us both. So
Okay.
we'll do what we can.
All righty. Well,
All right.
first of all, Tina, thank you so much for having me back. Was with you last year around this time, and I really commend you for your work in doing this and educating everyone on the red flags of domestic abuse, and for the month of October each year. So kudos to you. So I am Debbie Griffiths. I'm a native Californian. I currently live in Southern California. I am a survivor of domestic abuse, primarily due to gaslighting. And last year, I opened up, partially, I will say, and wrote a book called Torched, Burnt by a Gaslighter. And it's a fictional tale based on true events. And it kind of shows the red flags and subtleties of gaslighting. And I was in the relationship for 17 and a half years that produced three children. And finally, after I woke up in a psych ward one day after trying to commit suicide, because I thought that was my only way out, I realized that I needed to end the relationship and start rebuilding my life with two of the three kids. So,
Okay, well, I know that the book is about gaslighting, so
mhm.
let us switch to one of the videos
Okay.
that I have called up, to give us a little bit of an understanding and a background for what gaslighting is. Thank you all for joining. Yes, Kimmy, you are so correct. Sometimes they say things to make themselves sound good and to make you feel guilty, because most abusers play in the playground of your emotions.
Yes.
That is where they are most comfortable, because they know that they can push the buttons and they can control your emotions. And so they learn to push the buttons. And one of the buttons they push is the gaslighting button, which I didn't always understand exactly what it was.
Right.
So,
So, Merriam Webster, it was the most popular word in 2022. Gaslight was. And really, what it is the psychological manipulation of one person over another over an extended period of time, where the victim, questions their thoughts and their reality, and even their memories. Did I hear that right, or did I remember that right? You start questioning everything. So most people think of domestic abuse, obviously physical,
physical.
but we don't think of it. In fact, when my situation ended over 25 years ago, they didn't even call it gaslighting. it was verbal abuse, and it really wasn't even likened to domestic violence. So things have changed, at least more education and more
Right.
awareness in the last 25 years. But the emotional scars can be very hard. Those are the scars you can't see. And
Those are the scars you can't see.
you
That's
can't
right.
see. Yeah.
Let me start this video.
Want to pay attention. All right. So keep this list with you. The first one is you're being paranoid. You're overreacting. That never happened. You're making that up. You have always been crazy. Oh God, we've heard that, haven't we? Like that just makes your skin crawl. Or this one, I don't know what you want me to say. It's your fault. Everyone agrees with me. It was a joke. Can't you just take a joke? How dare you accuse me of doing that? Why can't you be more like, and then fill in the blank? They'll use that of, why can't you be more like your sister, your mother, my sister, my mother? I can't have any negative emotions around you. Let's get to the 21 most common phrases that if you're hearing these, you want to pay attention. All right, so keep this list with you. The first one is you're being paranoid.
So, I don't know about you, Debbie, but I heard just about that list daily. Also, as you said, that's not what I said. You didn't hear me correctly. I know I told you. You forget everything. I heard a lot of the triangulation. Everyone thinks that you're this. Everyone knows that I'm this and you're this. And
And
why are you making things so difficult?
right, right. And if you notice, every one of those statements minimizes or tries to minimize the value of the victim, and that worth of, that own personal worth and self-esteem of that victim. Yet the perpetrator is trying to find, by doing that, in his mind or her mind, is escalating their own self-worth by putting somebody else down. And so, it's sneaky. You don't see it
After
right
a
off
while,
the bat.
you take it in. You take it in, and you take it in because your own insecurities prior to the relationship. It's like we talked about this a little bit before we went on air.
Mm-hmm.
They prey on your vulnerabilities.
Yes.
They manipulate your weaknesses. So whatever you tell them in a moment of whatever, that they say they understand and they love you anyway and they agree and they get it and they're so sorry this happened to you. And yet, the first opportunity they get, it is the first thing that they poke at when they want to start devaluing you.
Yes.
And so it doesn't take long for them to erode your self-worth and your self-esteem, because chances are you came into the relationship with some of those same insecurities and they were just fine with it in the beginning, in that they understood. And now suddenly it's, you're always this, and I don't know why you're always so upset, and why are you so jealous, and and you're like, maybe I am. I mean, it starts the cycle of self-doubt. It plants those little seeds.
And over a period of time, it erodes your own sense of who you are, to where you don't even know who you are, what to think, what to say, what to wear, what to do. I mean, I got criticized for shoes, or, don't put nail polish on, or, and here's the thing, the sneaky thing is, it doesn't happen every day. My
No.
relationship was 17 and a half years. It didn't happen every day. We had periods when things were fine, and then it start up. I don't know what would set it off. Maybe it was a bad day at work. I don't know. It would set it up, and then there would be a period, and then there would be a reprieve, and then it start back up again. So, when you're asked, why did you stay in the relationship for so long? It's number one, it really wasn't a daily occurrence. And it takes this happening over and over and over again to where there's nothing left to who you are. And
Right.
either something happens, you become very depressed, or you try suicide, or hopefully somebody can kind of intervene, and you realize there's something wrong with this scenario.
Well, and the trauma bond. So for many of us who have gone through abuse, there it's called many things: the trauma bond, attachment style, codependency, Stockholm syndrome is another one of the phrases that people will talk about. But basically, it is where you have an addiction to the cycle of abuse. And it's if you know, and if you don't know, be grateful, because that trauma bond, that addiction, that cycle of abuse, the intermittent reinforcement is part of what plays into that. The unpredictability of their mood, their personality, whatever they're pissed off about that day, but not the next day, but something different the next month. It keeps you on eggshells. That eggshell scenario is a very real reality, because you never know what's happening, and over time it isolates you, because it's like, well, I don't know what mood he's going to be in when I get home, so I don't necessarily want to go out with him or her. I don't really want people over, because I never know what his behavior will be. And over time, it starts to isolate you. And of course, what happens is you become more and more isolated, but at the same time, more and more dependent on them for everything, especially how to feel, what to think,
the emotions,
how to feel, what to know, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And that's a control that, as I know, someone that I know, she was in the book that I collabed with, The Power of Breaking the Silence, The Blueprint of a Survivor. There are 7 stories in there. And she is very correct when she says abuse is a mental health issue. Because when the brain has been impacted, the brain does not know what to think or what to say or what to do or how to react. And so that's why I say, when people say things like, why did you stay or why didn't you leave? The brain cannot even process that, because PTSD is usually trauma to one event, but complex PTSD is when you live in a repeated trauma experience, like war. I think about the people right now in Gaza and Israel. They have lived with the unpredictability and yet predictability of war for many of them since they were born. And that intermittent, it's like when your body goes up, it's waiting to come down. And when it's down, it's waiting to go back up. There is a book, The Body Keeps the Score. And it is very, very true that your body is reacting in ways to things that are seen or unseen, known or unknown, to where it's almost like the body is learning to react without a thought process. because the brain has shut down. And so that's a scary place, because the processing that complex PTSD, as we talked a little bit a couple nights ago, brain trauma is real, and brain trauma, it does heal itself, but it takes time. So tell us about your book, Gaslighting, because I love the scenario of it.
So it's fictional tale, and it's about an older woman who's retired and is watching her her youngest granddaughter rather, and she comes in contact with a woman in her mid-30s with two kids, and she starts suspecting that the woman is in an abusive relationship. So over the period of several months, they become friends and have conversations. So it's the younger woman is asking the older woman, Martha, to talk about certain things that had happened to her, and Liz, who's the younger woman, starts seeing the picture, and then there's some tragedy in it, but it ends where Liz is okay, but she does leave the relationship and goes to rebuild her life. In the meantime, Martha is reliving things from her past, so it kind of reflects on how far she's come to overcome that trauma, and how well she's doing in her life, and rebuilding her life.
So when you were in your own relationship, I mean, because I know the book drew on some of your own experiences, talk about that a little bit.
Well, I met him when I was 18, and we in college, and it was right away. He actually approached me, and I hadn't even really been paying attention, and I was very flattered. I was young. I went to parochial, all girls Catholic high school, hadn't really had a lot of experience with dating and stuff at 18. So I was very flattered with the attention, and didn't see a lot of signs. Basically, I was naive to a lot of things. And so we got married. I was about 19, and within the first couple of months, there was an incident where he slapped me, and that's where some of the isolation started happening with keeping me from my own family. And and then things were fine for a while, and then we, our the oldest one came along, and we at that point then we moved back east. So we had moved across country a couple of times, and had ended up with two boys and a girl, and then he started traveling a lot and was gone for like a week at a time, and then when he'd come back, there was really no interaction. If there was, he didn't, there was complaints. You didn't like this, didn't like that, didn't, and yet I'm doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the housework, all the yard work, keeping the car up, taking the kids to school, the whole 9 yards, with no really, he wasn't there as a husband or a father. And it was reading a magazine article one day on verbal abuse in a national magazine that all of a sudden my stomach flipped when I read how some of the signs that this author had indicated when she realized that she was in a relationship primarily about verbal abuse. And I remember putting the magazine down, because the day I got married, as I was entering the church with my dad on his arm, my stomach flipped.
At that gut reaction.
Yes. And I remember grabbing onto my dad and not saying anything, but he said, you can back out of this if you want. And I'm like thinking, there's all these eyes looking at me. You know, I'm at the entrance of the church. He's like, now, you know, so
Right.
I said, no, I'm okay. And I chalked it up to, you know, wedding nerves, you know. So when my stomach flipped, you know, after reading that article, it did remind me of my wedding day. And I didn't think too much of it until a couple of days later. When he came home from a week's trip, I heard the garage door open. We had what's known as a tuck under basement. I was upstairs in the kitchen, heard the garage door open, and my stomach flipped. And I'm like, no. So I remember rereading the article, and the next couple of weeks it kept flipping, and I'm like, oh, there's something wrong. And so I didn't really know where to go. I had called my mom, and this was the time when you had to call to get the cheap rates. You had to call after 7 p.m. at night.
So I remember that.
Yeah. So this goes back. I'm dating myself. I know that. And
I'm right there with you, girl. Right there with you.
All right. I'm in good company. So this was during the day, and I called my mom and I said, you know, Mom, I'm not happy, but I don't know why.
Right.
And she said, I've been waiting for this. I've been praying for this phone call for many years. And I'm like, say what? And that's when she said, you know, we think he's kind of a little too controlling, but we don't know how. We don't know how. We don't know, you know, how or why or whatever. And I went, okay. So she suggested that, you know, I might see a professional. So I did. I found a psychiatrist. And I remember my first visit, and I had prepared for the visit. I had written all of this stuff down that had been bothering me. And literally, I had been bottling up for 17 years, right? And started in, you know, when the session was over. I mean, he didn't say a word the whole 45 minutes. And when the session was over, you know, I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. And his response was, there's nothing wrong with you. And so I left that office like, okay, if there's nothing wrong with me, what is going on?
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, it's like, what? You know, so that really got my wheels spinning. And yeah, I spent the next couple of months, you know, in therapy, talking it out. Proceeded at that time realizing, you know, this isn't really kind of working, and, you know, talked to my now ex about it, and he wasn't happy. He didn't want a divorce or anything, because that would mean failure on his part, and suggested couples counseling. So I did, but at that point the pressure was getting to be too much. And I started becoming very depressed, and I was prescribed medication, but the situation was spiraling down faster than the medication could kick in faster. So yes, then when, you know, one day it was, you know, I'm done. So I woke up in this psych ward, and the doctor came to visit and stuff, and he was not a man to say many words, but when he did, they packed a punch. And his words were to me, your environment is making you sick. So those were pretty strong words. Like I said, he packed a punch, and my mom and sister had flown out from California. I was living in Georgia at the time, and we talked, and, you know, I was brought up Catholic, so the word divorce was not in our vocabulary, you know.
Right.
So we talked all through that, and then proceeded to, you know, this was it for the marriage. So his parting words to me were, you will never make it, and no one will ever love you. Oh, well.
Well, you know, that gut instinct, you know,
listen to it.
Yes, I was going to say, for those of you who are watching, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the likes and the loves and the shares. You are listening to Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard. This is a platform and podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And we're doing 31 nights during the month of October for domestic violence awareness. I am a survivor, and I've been speaking to many other survivors. I can also remember seeing the red flag, feeling something was off, and then having things explained away.
Mm-hmm.
So in my own situation, I look back now and I am, like I said, 99.9 plus 0.1% certain, and then some, that he was more than likely living with someone when I met him, but he could explain things away by, I'm very active in a church and I don't want them to know that I'm seeing someone because I have been so recently divorced. And of course, for someone who, sounds like they're on a journey of love and self-discovery, who am I to argue with their journey when I'm on my own,
Right.
And so I ignored a lot of, just when I look back now, were just strange things. But I painted those red flags pink and or white and just went on. But I'm like you. There were times when I was sitting home alone and it was picturesque. Pot of coffee, it was quiet, watching TV, and I would hear the car in the driveway and I would go, oh shit, he's home. you know, like, and I mean, and sometimes it would be like hours he hadn't been home. And it was like, I should have been excited to see him, but it was like, man, he's home. Here we go. Okay. Because I don't know if your ex at the time, and I try not to say your ex or my ex, but the ex at the time, the word salad, verbal vomit. I can remember sometimes sitting in the kitchen listening to him going blah, 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 blah for hours and thinking to myself, what in the hell is he talking about? And could he just stop talking? Like I couldn't even process what he was talking about because it was usually some sort of victim game that he was the victim. And I would sit there and I would think to myself, what is he even talking about? Like I don't even know what he's talking about. And then my own flip was I got to the point where I didn't care what he was talking about. I knew then that once I made that flip in my mind that the end was coming because I can remember standing in the driveway one time saying to him, I'm choosing not to be here when you're here, and I enjoy being here when you're not.
Oh, wow.
And I knew then that I was getting close. And I had started counseling, and like your counselor, my counselor said, you do realize what you're dealing with, right? And I said, no. I said, what? And she gave it the name narcissism, and she gave me a piece of paper, and it was all the traits of a narcissist. And I read it, and it was like, I kept looking at her like, he's like every one of these things. And she said, yeah, I'm not surprised. And I was like, what's happening now? And she's like, it's only a matter of time. It's not going to get better. He's not going to change. It's not going to improve. Nothing. And that was hard. But I knew that in my mind, I had already made the flip that it didn't matter what he did or what he said, that I was coming to my own realization of leaving.
Yeah.
And I did not have the harshness of some of the thoughts that you had, Debbie.
Yeah.
Um, my own thoughts were, you know, I had to cut him off financially. Um, and I had to think about how to save myself. And like you said earlier, I didn't even know myself at that point. So
Mhm.
let's talk about after you left the marriage, because I couldn't even tell you what pizza I liked because we did, everything we did, it had to include him. I was never in the picture. I was never in the picture. I was there every day. I lived in the house every day, but I was never in the picture. I was never fully included in the picture.
Mhm.
So, how did you heal once you left? Where did you begin?
Well, I was still seeing the psychiatrist, but I had been a stay-at-home mom all of those years, and I
Mm.
didn't finish, college and stuff. So when I left him. So when I left, I was like, how do I get a job? What kind of job can I get? Where do I go? How do I begin? Right. So you start with the basics, finding a place to live and finding a job, so that you can get the apartment application to get approved.
He
Right.
had moved you far from California to Georgia. You were quite, but now had you gone back to California at that point with, oh, okay.
No, I stayed in Georgia because he got custody of my oldest one. My oldest one was 14 at the time, so he could decide which parent to live with. And I kind of knew he was going to choose his dad because he was, the favorite, basically for
The
from
golden
his dad,
child is their
the golden
call.
child. So I kind of knew that. I wasn't surprised. So I stayed in Georgia, as hard as it was being on my own without any, emotional support really from my family. I mean, I could get it from the phone and stuff, but it's not this, it's not like, hey mom, can I come over, or can you come over and watch the kids or anything. I didn't have that, so I able to get a job, still saw the my psychiatrist, slowly started rebuilding, my life, getting, um, advancing to getting more skills. And when my oldest one turned 18, he went away to college. And around that same time, my ex remarried.
Mm.
And so
That
at that,
song does it.
no, no, he was seeing her before.
Mm.
Another story.
There's the next book.
Yeah,
There's the
yeah,
right
really.
there, Debbie. There's the next book.
So at that time, I decided it was time for me to move back to California. So it took about 4 or 5 years after the divorce to move back to California with the other two kids. So there I had, my parents were there. They could help, like pick them up after school, and I remember my mom, around the holidays with my daughter, they would make cookies, those kind of memories and stuff, which I knew the kids needed. Um, and because now the geographical distance, he really only visited them once a year for maybe a couple of days. So it we needed that distance to heal.
Right.
And we
Right.
still
Absolutely.
continued, with therapy. My one son had anger issues, and so we had a lot of family counseling and stuff. And it's hard on kids. Divorce is hard enough, but compound it with narcissism, it's tougher.
Do the kids at this point, do they get it? Do they see it? Do they?
No. No, they did, they didn't. My daughter was the youngest. She was about 5 or 6 when the divorce happened, so she's probably the least impacted. The boys were older. So it took my middle one probably till he was about 18 to kind of really figure it out. And how that came to be is he went down the illegal drug road, and very heartbreaking. You know, as a parent, you feel like you're failing, and had to kick him out after 2 times of getting him in rehab. The third time, I said, "Okay, you're 18 now. 3 strikes, you're out. There's the door. I have to protect your sister." It wasn't long after that I get a call from the sheriff's department asking me to come down to the station. This is like 2 a.m. And apparently there was a drug deal or something that gone bad, and he wasn't arrested or anything, but apparently a gun was held to his head. And the sheriff said, he's high right now. And I asked the sheriff, and I said, "Look, here's my situation." Proceeded to tell him the whole 9 yards. I said, "I need to put the fear of God in him, and I can't figure it out. I've kicked him out." Blah, blah, blah. I said, "Can you arrest him and or can you at least lock him up overnight so he gets a glimpse of what the path he's headed?" He said, "Ma'am, I know what you're saying." And he goes, "We cannot do that any longer. The laws changed." And I went, "Okay." So I agreed to let it, because by this time it's like 4 a.m. I said, "All right, you're going to come home just for a couple of hours. I got to get some sleep. But the first thing the next morning, I'm taking you down to the halfway house. You're not staying here. You're not moving back in, period." So I get up the next morning and go out to the kitchen, and I see him out on the patio sobbing. I mean, sobbing, gut-wrenching tears. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "All of these years, I was angry at you." I said, "I know." He goes, "I really should have been angry at Dad."
Wow. That was a epiphany, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, "I know." And I think he was really surprised. He could see, the love of a mother towards a child, that kind of unconditional love. He could see that. And I think it's surprised him. And I said, "I've known this." And it's like, you've known this and you put up with this, but what, you're a mother, you do things for your kids, right? And at that point, he turned his life around. He had dropped out of high school, so he found a way to get his high school diploma. Then he enlisted in the Army, and he was in the Army for 12, 13 years.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he really turned his life around. So it was a struggle. It was not easy by any means, and then my daughter, as she got to a certain point, I want to say 20, 21, somewhere in there, some of the correspondence she was getting, she finally said, "Mom, I don't like the way when I read this, I don't like how I'm feeling." I said, "Okay."
That was flipping too.
And I said, "Talk about it. What are you feeling? What are you thinking?" So she, she could see some of this, and he had been repeatedly told by the kids, the psychiatrists that they were seeing, that he has to stop bad mouthing their mother, which was
Right.
me. And she warned him. She goes, "You're going to lose them. You think you're alienating them, from their mother, but
Right.
you're the one who's going to lose them." And that's eventually what happened. But it wasn't without a lot of, pain and tears. And
Well, as I have said, and other guests have said, at some point there is that line between knowing what you have endured and saving yourself versus knowing what you've endured and still trying to save the other person. And when they have eroded your self-esteem and your self-worth, it's easier sometimes to see that you would like to save them and that somehow saving them will save yourself. Yeah. But there comes that time when you realize that you put the mask on yourself on the airplane before you save another. And that's a hard thing to do. Like I said, I mean, when I left the relationship, I wasn't sure what pizza I liked. I wasn't sure, where I should go, how much I should spend, what I liked, what I didn't like, because so much of who I was got lost and just shrank away. And in that shrinking, um, you lose. And coming back to life um, is a is a hard place to find yourself when you've been told so many times, not you don't matter and you don't have value, but you've been told that you don't remember correctly, and your sense of reality is so off that the simplest of decisions seems huge.
You can
And
constantly second guess yourself,
yes, I mean, the self-doubt related to your self-worth and your value is huge. I mean, it's like I know that I have actually driven places to do something and get there and be so overwhelmed by the process of what I needed to do that I never got out of the car to do it. Like it's like, I told my friend Karen the other day, I no longer have a bucket list. I now have an F it list, because it's like I can't do it. I can't be bothered. I don't want to try. It's like the whole Clubhouse thing. I don't want to figure it out. If you want me on Clubhouse, you should have made it easier. I don't have the time, the patience, or the energy or desire to figure it out at this point. So you get to that point where you just start to protect your energy, protect your peace. I'm not doing it. So now I understand there has been a second book.
Yes.
See, this is how much you miss. So tell us about the second book, Open Up.
It's called Open Up. It's an ebook. It's available on Amazon, and it's really a guide for any woman who's ever been abused, rejected, and isolated to open up, write her story, find her purpose, and create a life of her dreams. And really, it's a guide on how to rebuild, starting with recognizing the abuse and then leaving it, and then finding, and I have some resources and stuff in there, from anywhere from, finding a job to the littlest things of, I had to make it, decisions on the types of insurance I needed. What do I need? Medical insurance? Do I need auto insurance? Do I need life insurance? It's just the simplest of things that you don't really think about. And especially if you've had a partner that took care of a lot of this, to do. And I've also written about, taking time to heal. You got to take that time to heal. Don't rush into another relationship right away. You have to figure out who you are first. Because the last thing I think anybody wants is a repeat of this, I mean, because, I mean, I don't want to find myself waking up in the psych ward anymore. And I was bound and determined that wasn't going to happen. So, maybe if I spent a little bit more time on that, maybe than I should, I don't know. But everybody is different, and every journey is different. And you'll know when you're ready. And in mine, it kind of went in cycles, because a lot of ways, when I first came out, I was in survivor mode. I had to I had to heal from the depression, that I was in my body, because I was in a funk. I could not even really get out of bed. I didn't want to get out of bed. It's like, the sun's shining, so what? Put the covers back on over my head. And then to, slowly healing from that, and then finding a job, and then building a career, developing skills and stuff, so that I could, advance and make more money, so that I could provide more for my kids, and then raise them, within the means that I could. So I couldn't just take that time to focus on me. I had to, there was a lot on the plate. So,
Well,
and focusing on my kids, I did not want them to be victims of abuse, nor abuse others. So that was one of the reasons why, a big reason why I said, okay, I got to get out of this relationship.
right. Well, and one of the things is, I think that people want to believe, and I know that I did, and then I found out that I was mad about it daily, because healing isn't linear. You kind of go forward a little bit, and then you run around the tree for a while, and then you go forward a little bit more, and you go around a new tree, and then you go back to the old tree, because now something from the new tree makes sense at the old tree, and now the old tree makes sense of some plant you saw a long time ago, and you just start to slowly connect the dots. Shameless plug, but nonetheless, I'm going to say it. So one of the things that I've created through my own journey is a subscription box.
Okay.
It is called Love Over Coffee, Reclaiming Self, and it is self-love and self-care through healing trauma. And everyone will be happy to know, finally, this month's box, the boxes just came today. I had to find a new supplier. But inside the box are activities and knowledge and affirmations to encourage self-help and self-healing, and trying to do, healing that trauma. Especially, again, I never want anything to sound as though abuse is ever the victim's fault.
Right.
But you own your own healing. And so at some point, going back to hold the hand of the inner child that was traumatized for whatever reason, okay, was needed. And that's what this month's box is. Well, actually, it's last month's box, but we had to wait for a new box. But it's about healing the inner child, going back and holding her hand or his hand and bring him forward or her forward, so that she can feel loved and protected, maybe in a way that she never did. And so she was a survivor as a young child, and her coping skills were as such. And fixing the world and pleasing the world, those are all things that are sometimes left over from trauma, childhood trauma. And so trying to figure that piece out takes a lot of self-work,
Yes.
not other work. Many times in life, we are other focused. We want to know how to feel, say, think, do, and believe based on someone else telling us how we should think, say, do, feel, or believe. But really, it's about us. And so if you can get to that point, that is an important, again, that's that mind shift. I don't own the abuse, but I'll own my healing, and I'll be damned if you get in my way. That's the setting boundaries part.
It is, and it's a daily journal. It's a journey, and here it is, 25 years later, and it took me all this time just to start talking about it.
Right.
Right. And I think this is probably went towards the last part of my healing. I think and again, I've been up and down and up and down and up and down. But I think actually now I'm at a point where I can talk about it. At first I was afraid to say anything when the book, I remember the publisher saying, "Are you ready to put this out there?"
Yeah. Are you ready?
I said, yes. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what are people going to think? What are people going to, well, I was afraid of all that, but I actually had people come up to me and say, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for talking about this. Now, could I have done this 25 years? Oh no, I wouldn't have even known where to begin. I
Right.
wouldn't even know who I was. I was still trying to figure things out, and I didn't have a lot of resources and stuff back in the day. Um, but at the end of the day, it does start with us. We have to own who we are. We have to figure that out. It's our self-worth. I've written it on my bathroom mirror in lipstick. I am enough.
I read the other day, I am enough. I did enough. I can let go. Because I do. I think we get stuck in the, and I know I still do it to some degree, and it may be part of trauma, part of personality, part of whatever, lifelong learner. I don't know. Again, still trying to figure some things out. But that is, I do to where sometimes I barely have time to enjoy what I've done before I'm on to the next thing. And I think some of it comes from wanting to prove that somehow I'm enough. I know I am, but now I'm in the mode of I want others to know that they're enough. And so I
Right.
do to make sure that I am helping as many people as I can. And then I have to step back and say, wait a minute. While you're doing all these things to help others know that they are enough, you need to step back and take a moment with my cup of coffee, and take a moment to breathe and know that I'm enough too, and that I deserve not to call myself lazy or whatever.
No, we need our love tanks filled up. And sometimes, if we're by ourselves, we're not in any kind of relationship. We really can't. In fact, we really shouldn't rely on other people to fill up our own love tanks.
Right,
It's up to
right.
us. It's up to us. So find that cup of coffee or that hour just to go take a walk, in the park and listen to the birds sing. Find that time to fill your cup so that you can, continue doing what you want to do. Because, Tina, you're passionate about this. I'm passionate about this. To some extent that fills our cups, but
Mhm.
it's also, it can be draining, as well. So we still need to find that time and those ways to fill our
I
cup.
keep hearing a noise and I'm like, what is that cat doing? Ian Van Zant says, of course we know you cannot pour from an empty cup, but at the same time, what's down inside the cup, that's yours. That's yours. What you pour from the cup is what's for other people. But until
Mhm.
your own cup is full for yourself, you cannot pour for others.
Right.
And so she says, when you tip that cup over, it should be full, and that's yours. And I never thought of it that way. What's down inside that cup is mine. And that's what we protect. That's what we
Mhm.
feel safe. That is what we feel comfortable sharing or not sharing. Those are the details that we tell or we don't tell. I mean, there are still aspects of my story that I have not shared. Um, and those are things that I don't necessarily feel safe sharing yet for whatever reason. And some of that is the processing, um, the acceptance of trying to split that hair, that fine line between what did I own in that piece of that trauma.
Right.
And that's it took me a long time. It took me a long time to get to that healing line where it's like I own up until this point and then cross the line and you own up to that point. But again, that splitting hairs can still come down as we victim blame and shame ourselves more than the world could ever blame or shame us. And that's because our culture grooms us to be such,
Right.
you
One,
know.
yeah, and one thing I like to add in there is part of the healing process, and it is difficult. It's a difficult one, and that's the part of forgiveness. But it's a necessary one. I feel is part of our healing process, and it's not just forgiving that other person, but it's also about forgiving ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think
And,
it's
and
Oprah.
that's the process.
Oprah
And I
said,
think there's the forgiveness comes in bits and pieces too.
"Oh,
As
absolutely."
as
It's
we
like,
heal, it's like, oh
right.
yeah, I can let that go. I can forgive and let that go. And then you go on, and then something else will happen, and it, might send some triggers, and you have to process it and go from there. And it's like, okay, now I'm ready to forgive and let go and move on. So
Well,
it's
Oprah Winfrey once said that forgiveness is letting go that the past could have been any different, because
mm,
we live in that moment of, I'm anxious about what I'm anticipating, I'm worried about what I'm anticipating, I'm anxious and worried about what has already happened. I never get to enjoy the present moment. And
right,
so we cannot go back and change the past. It
right,
already came and went and it is gone. But we can learn from it.
absolutely.
And one of the things that we have to learn from it is we can't change it. And so the forgiveness comes from letting go that the past could have been any different. And that's hard. That's
Very
really
hard. Very
hard.
hard.
Thank you to everyone on TikTok. I think we just met our goal on TikTok. Um, I do want to say that I know we're reaching that point in the month because I see it every year. This is the third year that I've done 31 nights. The podcast started in 2021. We did the first year in honor of Gabby Petito. We did the second year and the third year. This is the third year. In the middle of the month, the numbers start to drop off for listeners and watchers. And that's because it it gets repetitive. But you know what? It is in that repetition that sometimes we need to hear something 6 or 7 times. They say it takes a woman 7 times, if not more, to leave an abusive situation. So they will leave and come back, sometimes up to 7 times or more. And the same thing with the stories. You think you've heard the story before, but until you've heard it the fourth time, you start to realize, oh, yeah, that's true. Because I know that in my own situation, when I could step back and listen to him rambling in his word salad, verbal vomit, mouth diarrhea, whatever you'd like to call it, I realized that the story he was telling was different each time. And it's like, wait a minute. Last time that car was yellow, and this time it was blue. And this time it was on this road, and last time it was on this road. And you begin to but it took me hearing the same story about 10 different times before I started realizing, that's not what he said last time. And so I want to say thank you to those who are sticking it out. Thank you to my moderators who are still here night after night, because I know it's not easy, especially if you've been through abuse. It can be very triggering. So thanks for the love and the likes and the shares and the achievement of the goal. It matters. You matter. Every survivor matters, and every story matters.
Can I
I
just Yeah, I was just going to add that right now, Torched is like 50% off on my website
Aha.
right now for the month of October to honor Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And 50% of the book sale profits are being donated to the Nicholson Cooley Foundation. So I just, that's my shameful plug.
Well, and that's all right. I have decided that self promotion, after I have spent my entire life in other promotion, it ain't a bad thing. Nicole Cooley is the young woman that we met last night through her parents.
Mhm.
Debbie has been donating 50% of the proceeds to her book to that foundation. That foundation has been so bogged down in trying to keep the perpetrator in prison. They have not been able to realize all of their goals, but I know that they will continue to reframe and reclaim that foundation as they move forward in other aspects of what they hope to do with that foundation. It's a fairly new foundation.
It is.
So sometimes it can take a while to figure out exactly where it is you want to go with the foundation and all of its causes or nuances. I do want to tell you that tomorrow night, my guest is Karen Smith. She is a sister from another mister, or, we, what is it? Somebody from another mother. I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So I met her on Clubhouse. She's going to talk about her 33-year relationship, and she's going to talk about her own brain trauma and her own brain healing. And I can't wait to hear who she is, where she's been, and where she's going, because she's definitely on her way to some places. Mm-hmm. And on Monday, I have Lakeisha Walker. She is a nonprofit creator and owner and founder in Chicago. She is a human sex trafficking survivor. And we're going to talk a little bit about trauma that led to believing what's called a Romeo pimp. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that on Monday. Tuesday, one of our own community will be joining us again. And I will post that shortly. And then some other guests are still confirming and that kind of thing. We will have another live update on the 21st with Gabby Petito. Coach Takesha Wade will be here, and we're going to talk about a couple of other high-profile cases in the news. And then we're going to round out the month with other survivor stories. And we've got some other like self-defense people coming, how to prepare for court if you're dealing with a narcissist and or abuser. And then we'll round out the month with Gina Medico, the same guest that we started the month with, and talk about some of the highlights and some of the takeaways. So for those of you on TikTok, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your presence and your gifts, as in presents. And again, thanks for the love and the likes and the shares. And I will see you back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Thanks for the achievement of the goal tonight. And whenever we get to 20,000 likes, we can maybe get on the FYP, which is always a goal. So tapping's clapping. So thanks, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So I'm going to say goodnight on TikTok. All right. And I want to say thank you to Debbie for being our guest on Love Over Coffee. Voices now heard for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And I am going to end the live stream. Thank you so much, Karen and Carol. And I saw Patricia, Miss Aunt Pat. I saw some comments over here. Forgiveness is huge. Self-care and self-love is not selfish. Intentional healing is a priority. So, agreeing and saying all the same good things that we are saying. So, thank you, Carol. So I will end the live stream.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it all.